Hey, Todd, can you hear me?
Yeah, man. Right on. Neil, thank you for doing this.
Of course. I'm sorry it took so long to get my act together.
Oh, not at all, man. Are you kidding me? In fact, I forgot that you'd said yes, and I was like, "Fuck, I still got to." And then I look in the DMs in Twitter, and I was like, "Fuck, the guy actually sent me the email." All right, here we go then. Man, I've been a fan for so long, so I'm wondering, like, where do I even start with you? Um, I want to maybe go back to the beginning. I want to go back to, like, the Fallon house, man. As a kid, like, what are you listening to? What are your parents playing to kind of get you down this road?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, my earliest memories were one, inheriting my dad's 45 collection,
Yeah.
which was a lot of, novelty songs like, Monster Mash and Purple People Eater and
Y-
Splish Splash. And
The weirdest shit got played on the radio, right? Back in the day. Like,
yeah, it was pretty bizarre. And as I've gotten older, I hear people say like, oh man, music's gotten real terrible. I wish it would go back to the way it used to. And
yeah, what do you want to hear, Mr. Postman?
yeah, there's plenty of garbage from the 1950s and 60s that
Terrible shit.
45s. So
Yeah.
that was my very first memory. And then remember listening to a lot of Dylan, Fleetwood Mac, uh, Emmylou Harris. If a woman with long dark hair and acoustic guitar, my dad was a sucker for.
Yeah.
I ended up listening to a lot of that too. Beatles, of course, Gordon Lightfoot, uh, all the kind of classic folk rock crossover jams.
Yeah, my mom likes to remind me that I used to throw the 45s at my older brother,
Yeah, great
smashing the shit out
band.
of all these classics. Did you get into like the disco stuff too as a kid? Like, were they playing like ABBA and like Donna
Oh, oh,
Summers and all that kind of shit?
lots of ABBA, like mainstream disco. I don't think my parents ever set foot in a real disco,
Yeah.
but they listened to the stuff they heard on the radio, like ABBA. And of course, there was like Saturday Night Fiedler. And
Yes.
remember listening to the Star Wars soundtrack quite a bit. A lot of musical soundtracks. Well, my little sister was into musicals. I always despised them.
Yeah, same. I was never a fan.
Yeah.
Always a fan of music though. Like, music for me has always been in my life. Uh, you know, um, I play drums. I can butcher a classic like the with the best of them. Uh, but I never did go down that road like like you guys have done. And you seem like a very like every interview I've ever seen of you guys, you seem like fucking super down to earth guys. Every show I've ever seen of you guys, like I saw that when you guys were touring with Mastodon a couple 3 years back,
Hmm.
and you played the Commodore Ballroom here in Vancouver, and it was, man, like something about your band, dude. Like, what is it about your band? How much are you guys playing together that you're that tight?
Well, thank you for saying that. It's always hard to talk about because and I've never seen Clutch in the capacity that you have.
Right. I
I've
was a
always,
fan, and yeah, I mean, it's totally
always
different, right? You can see live shows, but it's not the same, man.
yeah. I mean, I love going to see other bands, and it's always like it's such a surreal experience, like being looking at the stage instead of out from the stage, and it's a great exercise to do. Uh, I think any musicians that play together for a long time, there are such very subtle cues of music or body language that it almost approaches psychic abilities. That's not to say there haven't been train wrecks; those do happen. Yeah, but
You got to have some train wrecks to get to the gold, right?
yeah, that if you're yes, or maybe wake you up that you were daydreaming or getting too comfortable.
Yeah,
To this day, I get nervous before going on stage, and I think that's a
really.
good thing. Because if you're yawning or kind of loathing it, then maybe you should think about something else.
Probably, yeah. What are some of the bands that you've seen over the years that you're just like, man, these guys are untouchable?
I think it took me a long time to realize how fortunate myself and the band were growing up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., because I, my very first introduction to local music was the Bad Brains and Fugazi.
Right.
And to me, that was like, okay, well, this is like every town has got Bad Brains and Fugazi, right? And
Nope.
that's not the case. And I saw Bad Brains kind of, I think it was it was right before they did Quickness. Um, at the old 930 Club, which was a small cap room, was I think 550, and that set the bar so high at the beginning. It's been hard to live up to that. Um, I'm trying to think of more
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like seeing a band like that caliber at a smaller room, right? Like something about big bands, small venues.
yeah, and they were so intense. The intensity was such that I think that's when I realized that there are moments when you see a band and there's a synchronicity between the band and the audience that almost creates a bit of a religious experience. You
Totally.
there's like a timelessness when you're in there. You think this is the only place you've ever been, and then you walk out and it's like it was over in the blink of an eye. And it's a big come down, afterwards. You wake up and your ears are ringing and your neck hurts, and you want it again. And I think a lot of people that see live music is because of shows like that.
Oh, totally. And do you think that we'll ever go back to the style that it was like when you and I were kids? I would imagine you're probably a little bit older, but probably not by much. Like, do you think it'll ever go back to that? Like looking at the album covers, you know, something about, waiting for Spin Magazine and Rolling Stone. And there was a bit of I don't know, it was a bit of an art to it. And it kind of just seems lost lately.
It's a bit of an embarrassment of riches. It's like the internet in all its ugliness and wonder is great. I've discovered all sorts of music because of it, but I would not want to be a band trying to get my head above that water because there's just so much out there.
Yeah.
I do think rock and roll or heavy metal these days compared to stuff like dance music or hip hop, it's tiny, um, and that's okay. I
Well, it's
think
because it's safe for programmers in radio and satellites and all that shit.
and it takes longer to do that. It's easy to turn out. I could probably, if you wanted, in the next 2 hours, turn out a dance tune.
Right.
It's not that difficult. Um, but I think all these, baubles of technology, whether it be, streaming or Spotify, MP3s, at the end of the day, we're not that different from our ancestors who loved listening to someone bang on a log. And kids, maybe they'll probably, most trends swing. You go all the way to like, okay, here's your silent rave that you can only get in through an NFT, and this is so extreme and new. And then everyone's going to go like, let's look over here for a minute and see what our grandfathers were doing. Why would I want to go into a basement of a house and listen to my friends play? And then it'll come back. And I don't really think it's going anywhere because it satisfies a human desire.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, you hear every once in a while, you'll hear people chirping about how rock is dead and it's going to the wayside. It's like, no, it's not. It's not fucking going anywhere. Rock's not dead.
There are thousands of kids right now in garages banging away, who many of them we will never hear about, but we will hear about some of them. And I hear about these bands from like the Who, not the Who for like from England, but the Who, the metal band.
Yeah.
From I believe they're from Mongolia. I could be wrong, but a place you wouldn't expect.
Right.
So if it's that global and that has that much longevity, I don't really see any reason to panic. Usually press will say things like rock is dead, and then that's only a setup for them to promote a band and say so and so has saved rock and roll.
Right. Exactly.
It never needed to be saved.
What did you think of Royal Blood when they first came out? Do you know that band? Because that was one of the ones where Jimmy Page had said, like, this band is basically saving rock and roll. It was about 10 years back when they came out.
I only got introduced to them in the past few months.
Okay.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because I have my head under the ground for various reasons, but
right.
So I can't really. I've only heard a handful of songs. That's not
Yeah.
to say that I'm disinterested.
But interesting. I guess my point is like fucking Jimmy Page said that. Like, it's not just some random person saying like these guys are reviving rock. It's Jimmy Page, man, said that.
There's metal's always been around, or rock and roll's always been around. It's I don't know, maybe it's the older you get, the harder it is to like, you know, go out every weekend, maybe. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. Back to that pain of the, man, the neck sore and all that shit. Like, just gets worse and worse as you get older.
Yeah. And it's also sometimes it's just the sad fact is might be laziness. I'm, speaking for myself, but
Yeah.
it's it it's not dead. It's never. I'm sure there's
No.
times where it might have been a little ill, but who among us hasn't been ill?
Right. What was your first concert?
Well, it depends what you want to classify as concert. I remember when I lived in Washington State, there was a big hit. I think it was in 1979 by an artist named Juice Newton.
Oh yeah. Just call me angel of the morning.
She did that playing with the Queen of Hearts.
That's right. Knowing and again it's smart. Da, 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 da. Yeah, my mom played that a lot.
My dad took me to see that at a high school auditorium, and
Okay.
it will have been Wembley in my childhood mind.
Yeah.
That was the first concert, and then as far as I couldn't tell you what first like punk rock or hardcore show I saw, because there was suddenly when I was able to go off on my own, I saw them every weekend. The first stadium show I ever saw was U2.
Yeah.
Which was pretty great. I was a huge U2 fan back in the 80s. And those are the immediate ones that come to mind.
Yeah. What are you watching? Over the last year we've had a lot of downtime. What are you binge watching lately?
That's the thing, I haven't.
Oh, really?
Usually, when the kid goes to sleep,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I've got probably about another hour before I'm, sawing logs. What am I going to do? And I'm trying to think, what did we start watching? Well, I started watching the Q documentary, and I kind of felt like it was giving me a brain cramp, so I stopped watching that.
The Q documentary?
It's a HBO thing, Into the Storm.
Oh, okay.
It's not the kind of thing you want to watch when you're trying to relax.
Yeah.
It's a documentary.
I like docs, though. BBC stuff is amazing.
Yeah, BBC's great, and I kind of feel like they're a neutral party, and maybe not completely, but more so than a lot of American media.
Yeah, totally. Feels that way too.
Yeah, I listen to that as a news source because it doesn't want me to like punch a wall.
Yeah.
Relaxing about the BBC host, no matter who they are, that is a bit calming.
As we're your little brother above, we're watching the States going like, oh my God, what is happening down there, man?
We're a young country. I hope this is maybe just like puberty.
It's like the terrible twos. Puberty, exactly.
Twos.
And it's not the terrible twos. Fuck that. Whoever said terrible twos has never had a kid. It's the terrible threes, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there was also, as my wife used to say, now we're into the fuck you fours.
That's totally it. I read an interview with John Paul maybe about 2-3 weeks ago, and he was saying that you guys are going to be going into the studio in the fall. Is that still happening?
That's the plan.
Cool.
We're trying to record here locally. It's hard to even talk much about it because it's in its infancy.
Yeah.
We're writing a bunch of riffs. I'm pulling my hair out trying to come up with new angles fresh angles, lyrically or melodically or what have you.
Yeah.
We get together 2 or 3 times a week. Prior to this, to be honest, last year I was not in a very creative mood. I think a lot of times people are expecting there's going to be things from artists, this watershed of creativity. And I'm sure for some there will be. Me,
Totally.
I
But I
kind of
mean, dude, like it's got to be both sides too. Like I've seen some bands, and you know, I can't remember the band's names right now, but I've seen some bands on social media like say the complete opposite of like, don't know about you, but this pandemic has made it so I don't even want to fucking go on stage anymore. I don't want to write anything. I've lost my creativity. Does anybody else feel this? Like, just because you have all this time doesn't mean shit.
yeah, and it's harder when this it'd be, I guess, one thing if you were a solo artist, but when it requires, you know, four people and go meeting somewhere and then going back to their families, you know, logistically that creates problems on even the best of days.
Right.
And we kind of concentrated on our Doom Saloon, you know, virtual concerts, which we did 3 of,
Yeah,
which
those are cool.
gave us something to do and just practice. Just because if we had been sitting around this past year, all our skills and muscles and would have atrophied.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good exercise, but now we kind of got the itch. We know this time next year, hopefully a new album will be out and we'll be touring properly in proper clubs and theaters or wherever, festivals.
Right.
Um, I think a lot of my reluctance to kind of be creative, or maybe one of the reasons was just I did not want to write a an album that would constantly remind me of what was a shitty year.
Pretty shitty year.
Yeah, for everybody. You know,
Yeah.
not just me. I'm not trying.
What album is this? How many you're in deep?
I want to say it's either 13 or 14.
That's lots, man.
As far as like full length LPs, I mean, there's been
Yeah.
all sorts of live things and smaller releases.
Yeah.
But that's, I think it's 13 or 14.
It's amazing, man. That's amazing.
It is.
Um,
Can't
as you
believe
might as you might imagine, Neil, when I mentioned you're going to be a guest, there's a bunch of clutch fan questions from social media. I kind of want to rip through some of these. I think some of you won't be able to answer, to be completely honest. Like Brad wants to know, he goes, tour plans, please. I saw them with the Sounds of the Underground with bands like Strapping Young Lad, fucking Devin Townsend, great guy. Opeth, Lamb of God. They're clean, non-triggered drum sounds separated them from the rest of the bands. Damn good band. So when are they touring? Like how can you plan that in a pandemic?
Well, you can't. And here's what's happening now, and I'm really it's what happens is there's bands and booking agents and promoters, and it's a game of who blinks first, and it all has to do with insurance companies when you're us, particularly when you're talking about festivals, because festivals need to be insured. So no one wants to say, okay, let's book these bands and get this festival site and put all this money into it. And then a month before this happens, the local municipality says no.
Right.
So it's a little dicey. I know things like Bonnaroo are booking.
Well, that just got announced with like Foo Fighters and Deftones and Tame Impala and a bunch of rad bands. It looks great.
And that's great. And I think they're kind of being the voluntary guinea pig for this in a lot of ways.
Wow.
We are looking to do our Christmas run.
Yeah.
And hopefully if we'll what we would really like to do, and this has always worked out the best, is before we record, go out on the road and do a couple quick legs where we go through the new material over and over again.
Right. Which is fucking rad, dude, by the way.
Oh, thanks. It's
like, that's so cool that bands do that, because not many bands, let's be honest, not many bands do that. They don't go like, here's a bunch of new shit you've never heard. Not many bands do that. I think that's super cool, man.
Bands dig it, and it has its practical purposes, because one, we don't have to think about it when we hit record. We can be in the studio a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, and it also gives you a chance to see like what's the audience doing with this song.
I find songs that we wrote in the studio compared to songs that we wrote and played on the road aren't as good.
Really?
When we play a song out on the road, there'd be like that happy accident where you played the note here instead of there, or I sang this over up here and not there. It's like, well, that's a better way.
Right.
When you have the luxury of the studio, you can always say, well, let me do it again.
Right. Pro Tools, baby. Let's just do it one more time.
The crowd doesn't let you do that.
No.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I love Matt's tongue in cheek here. Approximately how many Jesuses are on his dashboard?
Mine.
Yes.
Actually, there's nothing on my dashboard. It's actually starting to fall apart. I need to get a new car, but zero is the short answer.
I told Matt to ask. This is an interesting question. He goes, Shane goes, which Clutch song have they played the most live?
That would probably at this point have to be Electric Worry.
Yeah.
We I mean, that's the closest thing we've ever had to a hit, and we don't feel obligated to it. But the thing is, a lot of fans want to hear it. And I know there's Clutch super fans who are like, God, here we're going to go again with Electric Worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's that 15-year-old kid. This is his first Clutch concert, and that's what he really wants to hear. So we remind ourselves there's another 16, 17 songs that weren't that one. But you know, if that's like a chore, that's a good chore to have, is playing a 4-minute rock song every night, you know,
Yeah.
week after week after week.
Yeah.
How many times we played it, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Hundreds, thousands, maybe.
Probably thousands.
Thousands. Yeah. It's funny. Dave goes, ask him for an on-air, uncut Electric Worry chorus. Like, I don't know. He wants me to fucking get you to sing it. That's not happening, Dave. Or anything from Elephant Riders. Another awesome album from you guys.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's not happening, Dave.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking for that anyway. Matthew goes, hell yeah, Blast Tyrant is in the top albums of all time for me.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you think of, and maybe you guys have already done this before, but what do you think of when bands go out and they'll play like records in their entirety?
It's cool. I mean, we've done that. That was actually the last show we did, was Blast
cool.
in its entirety, New Year's Eve in Philadelphia.
Before the pandemic.
Yeah, that was, I guess, December 31st of, you know.
Yeah. And how did you decide on Blast Tyrant, which is probably one of my favorites from you guys?
We knew the anniversary of it was coming up. We also, and you know, actually that's not true, that because it's a fan favorite, and it seemed also like it's a good song that we had more or less played every song live in some iteration except for Ghost, which we had to learn, which was the only.
That's hilarious, man. When I talk to bands and they're like, yeah, no, we hadn't played that song for so long, we actually had to go back and relearn our music.
Oh yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah, man, that's
and
crazy.
It's a good exercise. You get back into, it's almost like a diary entry. Like, why did I say this? Why did we put in this part here this many times? And it kind of reminds me of the adage, like, if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. So I don't care for nostalgia, but at the same time, it's good to do a little self-examination.
Yeah, totally. Kyle wants to know, who's the most famous person you've met?
Well, let's see. I've met probably Dave Grohl. Probably. I mean, he's
famous, man. He's
famous.
Worldwide.
Very down to earth.
I wonder what it is about Dave. Like, it's almost everybody says the same thing. Like, is he just that fucking cool?
He's very relaxed, you know. And I remember, it's just as an unsolicited anecdote. We have a mutual friend, and we went out to dinner with a bunch of other people at a Maryland crab house outside on a river, and we're sitting there eating. About halfway through the meal, you got to mind this crab. When you're eating crabs, you've just got guts and flies. It's
you got the bib on and shit.
No bibs. T-shirt. And someone recognized him. And the next thing you know, it's just like a line of people. He has to go to the bathroom. It takes him maybe 45 minutes just to get there. And I say to our mutual friend, how does he tolerate this? And my friend, he's like, well, the minute this stops is the day I worry. You know, he saw it as like, wow, this is, the glass is not only half full, it's overflowing, and to be grateful for it. And he's, I've seen the other approach where it's just, get away from me.
Right.
Maybe he'd be different if he were sitting down with his family.
Yeah, possibly.
I certainly would be if it were too much, but
Yeah. I think an average person like me, or people that are listening to this podcast, I think an average person can't even wrap their head around even minor fame.
it's a weird, fame is the thing that's Clutch is not, that wasn't one of the things we were thinking. We just wanted to have fun.
Right.
And I wonder, it's like people that are of such a stature, like your Bruce Springsteens or your Paul McCartney's, like when you lose your anonymity, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to have, because next thing you know, you have assistants to do everything that you used to do, because you just simply can't do it, or you don't feel comfortable, or
yeah, like imagine, any huge Hollywood star going to get groceries.
yeah. And I'm sure
Like, what a nightmare.
some of them, I'm sure, enjoy it, but that's weird to me. It's like sometimes there's been occasions where I've been someplace like Home Depot or wherever,
Yeah.
looking, PVC piping, and then some guy say, "Hey, are you?"
Holy crap, Neil.
It's very jarring. Like you're
Yeah.
suddenly late. Am I being watched? It's
Yeah.
rare for me. We're talking about Clutch, not the E Street Band.
Yeah, exactly. Mark goes, yeah, get him to talk about aliens and cars.
Okay, we can do that.
All right.
Um,
Do you believe aliens live among us?
Among us, sometimes I think octopus or octopi are alien, but then again, I'm not a marine biologist.
Very smart.
Yeah, incredibly smart and unique. But I'll say this as a blanket statement. I think it would be very arrogant for us to assume that in the vast, endless expanse of the universe, that we're the only ones.
Right.
And probably can't we may not even recognize it if we're standing right in front of us, or perhaps we're incapable because of the way our brain and biology or what have you. I certainly think it's possible. Just because you see something in the sky doesn't understand doesn't mean it's a spaceship. But I'm always looking up, waiting and hoping for that time. But
yeah, same. I've seen those videos where, it'll be like a newscaster, say, or whatever, and they're doing their report live on the scene somewhere or whatever, and then they catch that the subtle eye change. Like, you notice the eye change right here where look, reptilian eyes and all that. And it's like, I'm not sure about that. But
that's the internet rabbit hole. It's like sadly, now anytime I go online, I have to tell myself, most likely what you're about to see is a lie.
Yeah, man, online's a slippery slope, man. Doesn't matter what it is.
It's kind of a bummer where I remember the early 90s, like, wow, the internet, it's like we're all going to be able to say whatever we want to whoever we want and exchange information. Who knew that there were so many liars among us?
Yes, exactly. Feeding you bullshit over and over. And cars. Let's get to cars then. I'm not a huge car guy myself, but my older brother was into it big time. Had a bunch of really cool cars as a kid. He had a Beaumont, which was awesome. A 68 Beaumont, I think it was.
Wow. I'm not a car guy. I don't have any cool cars.
Oh, you don't?
That's why they end up in songs.
Right.
It's
lots of songs, lots of alien talk, a lot of car talk.
I would love to see a flying saucer. That's why they end up in songs. I haven't yet. And I would love to have a Barracuda. Don't have one. Maybe I'll put that in a song in lieu of that. It's rock and roll is always, the lyrics has been the fun part for me, is like the escapism.
Right.
Especially in heavy metal, growing up, listening to albums and looking at the album art, and you kind of felt like suddenly you were inside the D&D module.
Did you get into D&D?
Oh yeah. I actually had a conversation with that with my son this morning. Because he's super into anime, and he had this shirt that that he got for Christmas. He didn't want to wear it outside today, and I asked him why, and he said because kids that are into anime get made fun of. And I was like, dude, don't do this to yourself. Because when I was your age, at the same grade, I was super into D&D, and then I was going to go to middle school, and I totally like stopped because I knew I was going to get brutalized back in whatever it was, 83. And I regret that. I should have stuck to my D&D guns. Then
Yeah.
the video games happened, and then you could do it privately and anonymously, which was cool. But at the same time, it's just like live music. There's something to be said about getting around a table with dice and having
Yeah.
an experience that'll never be replicated.
Oh, dude, it was like a weekly thing. Go to a buddy's place.
Yeah.
He's rocking the dungeon master. You're the cleric, you're the druid, you're the ranger, you're the wizard, or whatever the fuck. It was like that was an escape as a 10 to 14-year-old kid for me.
Same here. And yeah, it felt so edgy back then because there was that element that the same parents that were like heavy metal is going to lead you to a path of darkness, also D&D is going to do it too. And if you combine the two, then you're surefire going to hell.
Yeah, you're going to hell. Like it was just such a weird time too. Like think of like Dee Schneider, Twisted Sister, having to get in front of the Congress or whatever the hell that was that he, where he's basically like, you guys are on crack. This, let us do our music basically, and free rights and everything else. It was amazing that it came to that point. Was Tipper Gore, I think, was the one that was kind of the antithesis of that.
It was the PMRC, the Parents Musical Resource Committee, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing about it as a kid, and I don't recollect seeing that at that time, but I recently rewatched that in the last
same.
And he comes in there kind of looking, he's got his heavy metal t-shirt on and his big hair, and is like, and he just wrecks them.
Oh yeah, destroys them.
Very eloquent, reasoned, precise speech.
Yeah.
Zappa, same, and kind of, but much more like stern. And I think you think of the 80s in some ways weren't that different than the 50s in United States.
It's weird to think that kids today, when they think back to the 90s, that was like us in the 90s thinking back to the 60s.
Easily, yeah.
Like what?
My son asked me about my great his grandparents, and this was a couple of years ago. He asked me when was everything in black and white, like when did things become color. Yeah, because all he saw footage of, like from the 1940s and 30s, was in black and white. So it was this concept of looking at it like, and he figured out very quickly, like, oh, like it was the technology.
Yeah.
But you could apply that same reasoning to a lot. It's what was life like before the internet? It was fine, son.
It was awesome.
Today he was outside with his magnifying glass, putting leaves on fire. I was like, yes, thank you. This is what it's about. Just don't burn down the house.
Yeah, I would probably, if it wasn't for this podcast, I probably wouldn't even be on social media.
Yeah. I usually about once a week, I'm like, I'm deleting my accounts. This is garbage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I learned some cool things from cool people. I can communicate to them. I've since learned to shut off the noisemakers.
Yeah.
And the toxic.
Yeah. There's a lot of that shit. Yeah. Neil, thank you again for doing this. I'll ask you a few more questions and we'll wrap it up here. Justin wants to know about, he goes, yeah, ask him about that song he did with the Fans Kid and how that came about. Dude, that was awesome, man. How cool is that?
Yeah, that actually that's a good segue, because I was just about to dump all my social media accounts. Like, man, why am I doing this? And then someone tagged me on this father-son covering Clutch. I was think it was on Instagram or Twitter. And it's like, wow, that one, it's cool because obviously rock isn't dead because this is going on. And this kid's a great player. And I communicated with Nate Bergman from Lion Eyes. And originally all I was going to do was overdub some vocals on a cover, and communicated to the dad, Adam. And he's like, well, my son has, Tyler has original music.
You're
And
like, oh, here we go.
yeah, I did. I was like, whoops. Every
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
intent.
Yeah.
So, but it was great. And it kind of reinstilled not only my faith in, rock and roll, not that I had lost it, but it was good to see it in real life in action. First of all, it's flattering that anyone covers you, but when it's an experience for a father and son to bond in a time where there's so little physicality, it was really cool.
Yeah, very cool, man. Like the whole story, and then just the song was actually good.
Yeah.
As a fan of Clutch, I was surprised.
Yeah, me too. It's a good, solid, meaty riff.
Yeah,
And
it was really good.
Hear that song.
Yeah. You ever had a near death experience? Or not maybe an experience, but like a story where like, holy crap, I could have died there.
Oh, plenty of times. I mean, on the road, we could go on for another hour with stories about near accidents that I shouldn't be here.
Yeah. Driving anytime in Canada in the wintertime.
One of the most, well, yeah, I remember driving in your neck of the woods. I wasn't driving. We were on a tour bus.
Yeah.
We were coming up an incline through the Rockies, and some guy in one of those Subaru Brats from the 1980s tried to pass us on the left. And I watched that car just go right over the side of the mountain. And I went up to the bus driver and I said, we got to stop. He said, no, we can't stop, because if we stop, we're going to
get going again.
Yeah. And so he contacted who he could, but you see stuff like that. And we also experienced stuff with us that, very, very, very close to perishing, which is always a very humbling experience, because it's easy to take these things for granted constantly.
Yeah. You're almost rolling the dice with the job that you do.
Yeah, it's traveling in any capacity is dangerous. So that's why we try to when we're super young, you don't know anything. You feel invincible and you're willing to take risks. But now we try to exclude anything that would interfere with the show, whether it be personal behavior, people we don't know, things that happen after the show. If it doesn't affect the show the next day, great, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a tornado warning and we have to stop and miss the show, then we'll do it. We've experienced that, weather things, electrocution, you name it.
Wow. That's crazy. And the toughest I'll ask you, I think, is just simply because there's probably so many moments, but can you nail it down to one career highlight?
It's hard to say one. Since you brought up Mastodon earlier, it brings up one in particular. Mastodon and ourselves toured quite a bit. They opened for us many, many times, and then they got really big. And then we did a couple tours together where we would co-headline, and then they got even bigger, and they're doing these huge festivals. And we always remained friends, and it was great to see these guys take off the way they did. We love the music, we love them as people.
Mm-hmm.
So when we did a van tour back in the day, tiny clubs, or both in vans, completely strung out from no sleep. A few years back, we both Mastodon and Clutch played at Red Rocks, and there was a moment where I just kind of sat back and I looked at that sea of people in Red Rocks. I was like, wow, this is unexpected. And it was that moment where I felt like if I could bottle it up and take it with me, I could live with that for the rest of my days. And thankfully that didn't have to, but we can say that about that particular show, that, 7,000-8,000 people showed up to see these two, knuckle dragging hard rock bands.
Totally. That's great, man. What a career, dude. And you keep going, which is,
Oh yeah.
as a big fan of your band, man, it's exciting to hear that there's forward momentum still. There's still a drive to, be a better band. Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to hearing that next album.
Me too. That's the creative life and creating things. And if you can entertain people on the way, I mean, I couldn't ask for more. This
Yeah.
is great, and it'll continue to be great.
Yeah. Awesome, Neil. Thank you again for taking some time here for the Toddcast in Vancouver, Canada. You're easy to find online. Your band is simply at Clutch Official on Twitter. A simple search of Clutch, of course, on Facebook will find you. NP Fallon for your personal on Twitter. Are you on Instagram?
Yep, same thing. NP
Same
Fallon.
thing. Okay.
With the pictures on the
Awesome.
bottom.
Okay, man. Well, thanks again for doing this, and we will see you online.
Cheers.